Howdy doody, buckaroonies. Have you recently been injured in a workplace-related accident and feel that you're entitled to compensation? Do you need fast cash today with no credit or bad credit? Do you like complex multi-effects units capable of interesting rhythmic multiband processing? Have you or a loved one recently been diagnosed with mesothelioma? Or do you suffer from an incurable fear of spoons? Well, today's your lucky day, because if you call the number on your screen right now, I have the solution to at least one of these problems. This is ShaperBox from Cableguys. Cableguys are also the sponsor of today's video, so thanks to them for sending along the plugins and helping to support the channel. And Cableguys have also offered to sponsor a giveaway of 2 copies of their ShaperBox bundle, as well as 3 copies of the new DriveShaper. So if you want to enter for your chance to win big, you can join my Discord with the link in the description down below. If you haven't heard of ShaperBox before, the gist is this. It's one big effect with 7 of these different shaper effects. We have a FilterShaper here, which has some generic filters as well as some analog modeled filters. We have the time shaper, which allows you to get some cool stuttering rhythmic effects or halftime effects, something I guess like gross beat in FL. There's the DriveShaper here, which is the new shaper effect. This is a multi-distortion unit, so we've got clipping modes, square modes, rectify, and wave folding, a bitcrusher unit, a volume shaping unit, a panning unit, and a stereo width unit. If you haven't figured it out by now, these points in this grid represent the effect over time, so we can change the bit crushing amount over time in a rhythmic way, the drive amount over time, the time amount over time, and the filter movement over time. There's a bunch of different presets as well. There's basic stuff, edge, rhythm. You can just click these and drag them in. You can copy these over, so we could copy this wave, and let's say we want our drive to follow that pattern. Super easy to go in and just paste that in, and ta-da, we've shaped that. And what's really cool is all of these can be multi-band. So if we went into the time shaper, for instance, you can split this into up to 3 different bands here. We have control over the crossover, so now I've got low, mid, and high. We could automate the crossover if you wanted to, and if that wasn't enough, you can have different patterns and stuff going on per band. So it's a whole lot of power and a whole lot of fun to explore and combine these in different ways. You can also reorder them and a whole lot more. It's a really interesting way to manipulate and play with audio without a lot of really tedious automation. All of these effects except the time shaper also have an envelope follower, so we can open this up and enable it. This is also sidechain capable, so you could have something coming into the sidechain to trigger this. You can adjust that here. The time shaper does not have that because that would probably just be really weird. The volume shaper also has a compressor, so we can do that and enable this for sidechaining. So this, with the sidechain presets here, makes for a really nice sidechaining utility similar to something, I guess, like LFO tool. So ShaperBox here comes in at $99 for the entire collection, which includes all the different shaper effects. There's also the full bundle at $184, which includes this. It also includes the MIDI shaper effect, Curve 2 synthesizer, FilterShaper, and the halftime effect. You can also buy these shaper effects one at a time. I think they range from about $34 to $44 a piece, but personally I feel it's worth it to just get the full bundle, and I think that's kind of priced by design because this is really best experienced all at once. Here today, I've made this kind of cool, dark, cinematic techno loop, I guess is what I would call it, and I wanted to show you how I got it from this super boring thing to a much more interesting result using ShaperBox, FilterShaper, and the Curve 2 synthesizer from Cableguys. So let's take a listen to the before and after. Think you get the idea. Before all this stuff is applied, it sounds pretty lame, but using only ShaperBox and the FilterShaper, this is what I was able to turn that into. So first off, let's talk about this main synth sound because that's really the heart and soul of this track. Super basic sound, just a couple of saws with a filter and an envelope, a vintagizer just for some warble, but the real magic is coming from the ShaperBox here because I'm using 3 of these different shaper effects. So let's bypass this filter here. Without anything on it, it sounds like this. Bringing in the filter, really just added some groove. Now to make that a bit more spicy, I used the DriveShaper here. So this is a soft clip at only 25%, and I used one of the preset rhythms here just to add a bit of bounce to it as that filter opens up. With some of the more extreme modes, it can really start to get interesting. I also use this in multiband mode here just to keep the low end nice and clean, because if you distort the whole thing really, really hard, it starts to sound weird. So I just used the soft clipper and just used it only on this top band, just soloed it out, and found where it worked at. So right about there seemed to be good, and then just left it going. From there, I used the Crush Shaper here. This was just another preset. I went into the rhythmic ones and I just used this. So this is actually just creating a bit of rhythmic bit crushing. I found that this also added an interesting transient to the sound, so then I split it up and used only this really high information here. So this is everything above probably 6-ish K or so. I don't really know where that cutoff point is, but just the high end to get that little bit of click on those beats. For some added interest, I also brought in FilterShaper, which is a dual filter here. I ran this in serial mode. I used this preset panning sweeper, and I don't really remember what I changed. I think I just tweaked the cutoff. So this is actually just a filter being modulated with some LFOs. Just added this cool kind of throaty growl, and cleaned up a bit of that just too much distortion and bit crushing. It just softened the sound out, but made it a bit more aggressive, especially by bringing in a lot of filter drive here. Now, where this sound starts to get interesting is this send effect here. So what I've got is actually just a really big reverb going on, and then I send it through this ShaperBox. If we bypass this, it just sounds like a big washy reverb. So not really that interesting, just a big reverb. So first up comes a filter with the rhythmic preset here, cut off relatively low and medium-ish resonance with the 24 decibel per octave warm low pass. This creates this really chunky, groovy reverb feel. So it's a really nice thick sounding filter. That's going through a little bit of DriveShaper here, so soft clip, 41%, so it's relatively hot. And it just adds this kind of extra punch to the rhythm of the reverb. Then this goes through a time shaper effect, but what I did is split this up. So the low band is untouched and the mid band is actually in half time. So a little hard to pick out, but if you listen to it carefully, it really plays off the main synth rhythm nicely. So we have like the top half of this rhythm slowed down and put through a reverb, which is just really, really interesting. So that's how I got kind of the core dark feel to the track. Now for the kick drum in the track, I actually used a volume shaper as a subtractive transient shaper. If we disable this, the kick drum I found was this really big thing that was really loud and really boomy. So first off, I volume shaped it here, so I just did this across everything. You could also do this in multiband mode if you wanted to, but I figured I just wanted kind of a short, tight kick. So I just shaped this a little bit, and then I could adjust the curve, get an even kind of tighter sound, or maybe just a bit more body to it. But right about there sounded fine. But then there's this kind of ringing character to the kick, and I wanted it to be a bit more thunky and rounder. So for that, I used another DriveShaper. Split this up. I've got a soft clipper on the low band and then a hard clipper on this mid band. So I just drove this up right to the point where you kind of hear it just rounds off the kick, and then I've hard clipped the tops ever so slightly. It's actually not really doing much of anything, but if you increase the drive, bit more apparent. So I wanted it just to have this tiny bit of click to the transient just to cut through things a bit better, and that was really all I did. Because all of these effects can operate in multiband, like I said, things, the volume shaper, creating a multiband subtractive transient shaper, DriveShaper for multiband distortion, they're actually really handy sound design utilities. You can also use them just as a single band, so if you want to just a hard clipper, you could do that without any rhythmic stuff like I'm doing here. I'm just using it to shape the sound and then drive different aspects of that sound with the DriveShaper. One other kind of cool idea is using the envelope follower here. So we could do this to have a rhythmic kind of reactive effect. So if I wanted maybe to have this filter open up a bit or something like that over time, we could just draw in something, I guess, kind of like this. And we'll use the envelope follower here and do maybe something along those lines to get something a bit more interesting. We could also just change the attack and release. That way we're just getting a bit of filter movement. We could invert it and do all sorts of weird things. So let's talk about sidechaining with volume shaper, because this is a really common application. And recently I've been using UVI shade to do my sidechaining just because it does something very similar to what this does, just a little bit different. But I've actually started to like this more because I can dial in the curve really, really finely to get it exactly how it needs to sit when I'm doing sidechaining. So I've got this in sidechain mode here, just fed this from my kick drum, used one of these sidechain presets, and just altered the curve, I think, the tiniest amount. So if we bring in that kick, you can really shape this to exactly how you need it to sit. Another thing worth talking about, I think, is the Curve 2 synthesizer here. I've used this for this main lead, and I also used it for the bass. So that is the bass patch here. Just used basic FM patch. This is actually one of the presets, and then the main synth lead I just made myself by drawing in a waveform. So that's how this works. You can draw in a waveform to create the output sound. It's also got a basic matrix. It's a little hard to see on my screen. I've got a big 4K display, so some of these are kind of small and I have to sort of lean in to see what I'm doing. But it is kind of a fun, interesting synthesizer, and you get up to 10 waves and you can make them interact in all sorts of weird and fun ways. On the main lead synth here, I've got a couple of things: this crush shaper, a filter shaper, drive shaper, and a pan shaper. The drive shaper in particular was a lot of fun. I was messing with a lot of these different presets to find something a bit more spicy and weird. So if we just A/B this really quick, we've got the synth before. Bring in that filter. Bring in some drive. And some panning. Just add some width and interest. For the big bass sound, I use a 24 decibel per octave Salon key low pass. I added just a little bit of resonance, distortion, drive, and a touch of resonance here, as well as the envelope follower. So this just creates kind of a aggressive, resonant filter bark to the bass, and that was really all I did for this one. For the filter closing and opening effect, as well as the big kind of fade out on the end here, I just used an instance of FilterShaper with a low pass and a high pass. Really not much to talk about here. I just opened and closed those off with some automation, and that was really it. So it's a nice tool for that as well. To quickly go over the percussion here, there's not much to talk about. I'm just going to kind of skim over it. I've got panning on one of them. I've got a time shaper going on another one. This is just creating some kind of cool glitch effects. Another pan shaper for some movement. Filter shaper here just to close it off with a bit of resonance. And a drive shaper with some rhythmic effects just to create some kind of pumping aggression. On the other layer, I've got another time shaper doing some glitchy stuff. Filter shaper here just for some kind of sample and hold type filter stuff or sequence filter stuff. Volume shaper for just some added rhythmic interest. I've got panning here, drive shaper here, and crush here. This was actually one of the presets, Motion Rhythmer 3, so I don't know if I touched anything there, but probably not. For adding a lot of movement to percussive instruments and other things that have a lot of rhythm, the ShaperBox tools are a lot of fun to experiment with because it can not only add rhythm to things that might not have them otherwise, like I've done with some of the synth lines, but also really start to enhance the rhythm in some interesting ways. So yeah, that was how I made this cool kind of dark cinematic techno-y thing using ShaperBox, FilterShaper, and Curve 2 from Cableguys. The new DriveShaper is a lot of fun. I think for 44 bucks, that might be a bit steep considering the entire bundle is $99, but I think once again, that's really by design. And again, all of these things are really best experienced together. As a single effect, it's worthwhile, but it really starts to shine when you start to combine it with the other shaper effects. I do like the different drive modes. There are quite a few. It's a really useful sound design utility, especially considering that it can be multiband. If I had one kind of suggestion, I would love to see a way to just click this wave shaper here and make my own curve, similar to like I could do with Curve 2 or the other curve editing possibilities of the Cableguys plugins. I would love to do some kind of wave shaping thing that I could control using the curve editor because I think it's a really nice interface. As for the curve synthesizer, it is really interesting. It's a bit of an oddball, and I think it's a really unique way to make waveforms, and I've actually been using it quite a bit for making wavetables and different waveforms to put into things like Serum or Vital or whatever I'm working in to do some projects for. It's a really good tool for that. As a synthesizer, it's probably not my favorite. Again, it's kind of hard to see on my screen, and it's not the most efficient workflow. It is really fun though, and there's not really anything else quite like it. So worth checking out. But like I said, if you do anything involving wavetable design or waveform design for synths or sample libraries or whatever, actually a really powerful tool for that, and I do like it quite a bit. For Halftime and Pancake, I really didn't find myself using them much, if at all. I installed them just to check them out, and they are solid effects, but the tools inside of ShaperBox do the exact same thing, so I just didn't really end up using them. Finally, that leaves us with MIDI Shaper, which I installed and checked out. I thought it was kind of fun. Again, not really something I would see myself using because DAWg and things like Voltage Modular do that exact same thing, so it's not something that would really add anything to my setup. But if you're using other DAWs that could maybe use some MIDI control and fun curve editing stuff, I think the MIDI Shaper is actually worth checking out. It's quite a bit of fun, but not really something I personally need. ShaperBox 2 and the respective shaper effects from Cableguys are a really fun tool to check out. It's an interesting rhythmic multiband unit, it's a pretty powerful sound design tool, and it's all packed into a very accessible and easy to use interface, despite it being capable of some pretty complex and deep things. Cableguys, DriveShaper, and the other ShaperBox effects, FilterShaper, Curve 2, all that stuff is available right now, so if you want to check that out for yourself, you can find those all today at cableguys.com. Big shout out again to Cableguys for sponsoring today's video and helping to support the channel. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys again soon.